reckon I could probably talk about Duke Nukem 3D all day. It's collectively one of the games I've spent the most time playing throughout my entire life, and almost 20 years on, I still consider it to be one of the best FPS games ever made. Developed by 3D Realms, it came at a time when the PC gaming market was saturated with what gamers and critics alike refer to as Doom clones. Now these were first-person shooters requiring a little more than just basic navigation with simple shooting controls. There were of course deviations to the formula. Games like Dark Forces featured the level objectives, a limited life system, and frequent cinematics. But for the most part, a lot of these games felt very similar. If you compare Duke Nukem 3D to other shooters like Doom and Heretic, it doesn't look all that different, but the real thing that made it unique from its brethren was the at the time unparalleled level of interaction with the environment and the eponymous protagonist. Sure, it's just a shooting game, but it's a shooting game that lets you smash windows, turn lights on and off, look through security camera feeds, use toilets, pool tables, and admire yourself in the mirror. And the build engine showed off a very cool destructible environment feature where walls with large cracks on them could be destroyed, often causing large changes in the architecture of the level itself. The story itself is pretty simple. You're a steroid-infused action hero who has to save the world from aliens that have abducted every young, attractive female. As Duke Nukem, your only objective is to kill all the aliens and save the chicks. It's the kind of game that if released nowadays would have social justice warriors breaking their fingers because they couldn't type out their hate tweets fast enough. Yeah, that's right baby, Duke was politically incorrect, but back in the 90s, the world didn't have their panties in a twist. People weren't literally offended by everything, and most people could appreciate the satire. It was violent, it was cheesy, but it was damn good fun. On top of all of that, it had some of the most detailed and creative level design we'd ever seen in a shooting game, running on the build engine which would later leave its legacy with the other high quality titles Blood and Shadow Warrior. But I'm not here to tell you what you already probably know. If you want to hear about the game in any great detail, then go check out my video review. The real focus for this video is related to the countless mods and source ports that have kept the game alive and kicking up to this day, and much like Shadow Warrior, it also got its own sort of remaster or HD edition in the form of Duke Nukem 3D Megaton Edition. Now what I really think is most interesting about this edition is that it got pulled from digital stores, almost at the same time of the original game's 20-year anniversary. It was developed by Devolver Digital, who also worked on the Shadow Warrior Redux edition, and though it does a decent enough job as a HD remaster of the original game, it does at times feel like the bare minimum required, and it leaves a lot to be desired in certain areas. Also, you might think because it's not available for purchase that we can't talk about it. Well, you'd be dead wrong, Sonny Jim. In fact, the game is still widely available through torrents, if you're into that sort of thing. But let's not rip the game a new asshole just yet. Firstly, it is true it's a great version of the game in the sense that you get the Atomic Edition of Duke Nukem 3D, which is really the most definitive edition of the original game, as well as all of the expansion packs included. Prior to this edition being released, they could be really hard to get your hands on, especially if you're after the original CDs and the cases they came in. Having said that though, some of the expansions are kind of questionable in quality. I think it's agreed that Nuclear Winter is by far the worst of the bunch, and Duke It Out in DC, whilst not terrible, is more impressive in terms of the scale of the levels, more so than the layouts. Life's a Beach is really the only true total conversion for Duke Nukem 3D, and it easily has some of the best level design out of all the other expansions. Also, the fact that all of the enemies and weapons have been reskinned to suit the holiday theme makes it much more enjoyable and lighthearted. But anyway, we're getting sidetracked. The main issues with the Megaton edition are again mostly technical, like they were with the Shadow Warrior Redux. For starters, the mouse aiming is again kinda clunky, and it just feels like there's some kind of minor mouse acceleration in place. As before, it's easy to turn vertical aiming off and just let the auto-aim system aim up and down for you if need be, relegating the mouse to simply rotating your view. The Megaton edition doesn't crash nearly half as much as the Shadow Warrior version did, but the frame rate can at times be a little bit jittery. This becomes even more apparent when playing in co-op with a couple of mates, during which point the game has massive input delay and rubber banding. I was playing with 2 other people and there were times when it was almost unplayable, and the weird part is that it doesn't even seem to be a connection issue, more so it's something to do with the levels themselves, and it seems to shit itself for a whole heap of reasons.
No one touch anything! Stop fucking pressing E! Stop fucking pressing E!
Another weird thing about the co-op is that there's no weapon stay option, and you don't have the option of leaving the weapon pickups the same as they are in the single player, meaning you'll have access to certain weapons earlier than you're supposed to. And in regards to the weapon pickups, it also means that if you've already got a weapon like the RPG for instance, you can't pick up any other RPGs in a level, which makes ammo limited as well. If I sound like I'm being a bit too critical, well, the reason for this is that this is the sort of stuff you'd kind of expect and really want from a HD remaster. I mean, the whole point of these kind of remastered editions is to clean up, fix, and optimize the base game. And it kind of harks back to what I said earlier, how this whole thing just really feels like the bare minimum needed to repackage the game and throw a price tag on it. I got the feeling at times that the people who worked on this didn't even play the original Duke Nukem 3D, or else these kind of faults wouldn't exist. But again though, possibly the most interesting factor about the whole thing is how the game has been pulled from shelves, or websites if you will, now that the rights to the game has switched hands from Devolver Digital to Gearbox, who worked on Duke Nukem Forever. So as a result, the only way you'd have a copy of this game legally is if you managed to snag it before they pulled it from stores. But even if you didn't, you need not fret Sonny Jim, as I don't think it's really all that good of a source port anyway, and as I said, the only real benefit you get from owning it is having all the expansions in one place. You also did get access to the Steam workshops, where people were creating some pretty original content for the game as well, like being able to play through various maps from Doom recreated into the build engine. I think most people would agree that the best source port available is eDuke, at least in terms of stability, which allows you to smoothly run the game in modern resolutions and all that shit with proper mouse aiming that doesn't feel janky. It also allows you to easily run the game with the high resolution pack, which is a neat way to play through the game if you're sick of seeing the same looking pixels and textures and want to see the game with a bit of a visual facelift.
You son of a bitch.
Until Gearbox Software decide what the hell they're doing with the franchise, arguably the best way to get your hands on all of the original content is the Megaton edition, and it's easy enough to run the games in eDuke if that's not your cup of tea. Regardless of which way you choose to play the game, Duke Nukem 3D still stands the test of time as one of the best FPS games ever made. And with the recent Doom reboot release, there's never been a better time to go back and revisit this old classic. Come get some.